Summary here. The use of electronic shock collars, e-collars, is one of the most controversial topics in dog training. In this study, we compared e-collars to methods relying entirely on food rewards in order to stop dogs running after a lure. We found that dogs receiving shocks from e-collars stopped chasing a lure within 2 sessions of 10 minutes of lure running per session. These dogs also refrained from chasing the lure in 3 out of 4 test sessions. 2 groups of dogs trained with food rewards did not refrain from chasing the lure across 5 training sessions and failed all 4 test sessions. Aside from presumably pain-induced yelps in the dogs with e-collars when they received shocks, none of the dogs in any groups showed any signs of stress or distress. E-collars may be an appropriate tool in the hands of expert trainers training behaviors that have important welfare impacts, such as running after cars or other animals. Future studies should investigate the levels of expertise needed to use e-collars effectively, the kinds of behavioral problems for which they are best suited, and longer-term implications of their use. So basically what they're saying is that, okay, 2 sessions, what do they say, 10 minutes each? Yep. 10 minutes each. They were able to stop a dog from chasing a lure. In this case, they're using the word lure as the trigger that is moving that historically an animal would want to chase, right? Again, we knew this. We knew that we could stop it very rapidly because in any sort of positive reinforcement situation, you're never communicating to the dog what not to do. You're teaching alternative behaviors, right? You're creating incompatible behaviors, but all of them are going to be contingent on you doing a technique actively with the dog every single time they're in the presence of that trigger in order for it to work, for the most part. Maybe after enough history of success, you could train the dog to cue in on you when they see an alternative trigger, like automatically. But if at that point your reinforcement just disappears, the behavior will disappear, they're still going to want to go and chase the animal, whatever, right? So we knew this, right? And they're obviously saying this is not to say that this is necessarily an easier option or anybody can just go do it. Obviously, there should be investigation of the level of expertise needed to use the e-collars effectively because myself as a balanced dog trainer, most owners out there who may have bought an e-collar from the store before, we all know that it isn't as simple as just hit a button, hit a button, hit a button. No. There is a little bit of technique that goes into your timing with things, your consistency of things, understanding your level with it, et cetera, that goes into play when determining, is this actually going to inhibit and stop the behavior, or is it going to be more of a temporary solution? But we cannot deny that in the short term, we're talking 2 sessions versus, I think, 5 sessions in the force-free. 5 training sessions in the force-free approach. Which one was more effective? And this is my big thing with training in general is when we have easy, I don't want to say quick fixes, but when we have much more rapid solutions for things, why would we not use them?
Yeah.
Why would we not use them? Why would we not use them?
It's a good question, David.
So whatever. Additionally, there's future studies should be, going into, the longer term implications of the use, right? So are there long-term, issues on the dogs using these methods and stuff? It obviously didn't study that, which is a hole that I'm sure a lot of force-free people are going to look at. And they're going to say, well, what about the long-term issues? What about the long-term issues? Additionally, what kinds of behavioral problems of which they are best suited? Obviously, in this case, they were exclusively working on chasing lures, right? So it's not like this deep emotionally charged thing, like something like, fear-based aggression or whatever it may be. It is something as simple as, oh my God, I see this thing, I want to chase it. Oh my God, I see this thing, I want to chase it, which obviously could put you in a position where, there's less hypothetical fallout on the back end from it because you're not suppressing like this deep emotional state in a dog or anything like that. So whatever. So I want to kind of, like I said, read through this a little bit and we'll see what we might learn from it.
Cool.
So that was the simple summary. So the abstract. Controversy surrounds the efficacy and welfare implications of different forms of dog training, with several studies asserting that electronic shock collars have negative welfare impacts while not being more effective than non-aversive methods. However, these studies did not specify the schedule and intensity of punishment used or the effectiveness of the training method. In the current study, we attempted to train dogs across 6 sessions to desist from chasing a fast-moving lure in one of 3 randomly assigned conditions, and then tested for retention and generalization in 4 further test trials. Group A was trained with e-collars. Group B was trained with non-aversive methods and the lure moving as with Group A. And Group C was trained as for Group B, meaning they were trained with force-free methods, but with a lure intentionally moving slowly before its speed was progressively increased. So basically working a little bit more under threshold with things, making it a little easier to teach the behavior first before the full speed, which is a lot of force-free trainers will preach is, you don't jump right into training at the most difficult situation possible. You work at a distance, you work under threshold, et cetera, and then that allows you to be successful at a higher distance.
Understand.
All dogs in Group A stopped running towards the lure after 1 or 2 sessions, and none chased the lure in the first 3 tests. 67% of these dogs chased the lure in the final test in a novel arena. So novel arena, it's in a new place. Obviously, as we know in dog training, you have to generalize anything that you work on. So that doesn't surprise me that in a novel arena that they would still fail the test, and especially given that this was after 2 sessions, right? We're not even claiming as balanced trainers that 2 sessions is enough to completely fix a dog. What we're claiming and what they're showing in this study, that in 2 sessions, look at how much you can accomplish. Imagine if you had 5 sessions. Imagine if you had 10 sessions, just how good it can get. None of the dogs in the either Group B or C successfully refrained from chasing the moving lure in training or any test. Video behavior coding indicated few stress-related behaviors across the training groups. So obviously, they're not saying it's totally stress-free. Nobody's saying in balanced training that there's no stress involved ever, but what we're saying is there are few stress-related behaviors, and this wasn't studied specifically in it, but in our experience, those hints of stress that you see very quickly go away as they become more clear with the expectations of things.
Quickly. So they stopped recording after the dog would stop going for the lure, pretty much. That's when they would.
No, they didn't say anything about that. The only thing it said pertaining to video was video behavior coding indicated few stress-related behaviors across the training groups.
Okay.
So they just didn't study it long-term enough, right? This wasn't a study of 2 years to see, okay, now that we've totally stopped the chasing 2 years from now, what are the levels of stress that the dog is experiencing? This was just basically on the effectiveness of the training methods in the moment.
Sure.
Right? And what they could observe of immediate signs of stress versus obviously, having no stress or having a lot of stress.
For sure.
If it seemed to be a detrimental amount of stress in a short period of time or not, which it did not happen, obviously.
Heard.
Okay. So 1, introduction. Since the 1930s, dog handlers have been using electricity to punish dogs for problematic behavior. A device patented in 1935 administered shock down an electrified leash that was connected to an electric generator. The inventor noted that the length of the leash allowed the handler to administer a punishment from a distance. A 1955 patent noted its improvement in previous electric training devices by not requiring the handler to be connected to the dog by physical attachments, and claimed it was more humane than previous methods, which had been criticized for their apparent cruelty. The handler held a radio transmitter, and the dog wore a harness containing the radio receiver. Once a signal was relayed, it activated a series of coils and capacitors to generate a voltage potential to shock the dog via electrodes built into the harness. By 1961, the electric aspects of the collar were small enough that batteries could be stored on the side of the collar to administer a shock to the dog. Over the next decades, these collars continued to be updated and modified to the range of brands and types available today. So again, we've all said this a million times before, old school e-collars were pretty barbaric, but when we say barbaric, it was just much more dangerous. The types of shock that they were using were truly the shocks you think of when you think of you're getting electrocuted and actually injured or burned or any of those types of things. They were much more they were much more dangerous from that regards. When
Yeah.
we talk about obviously the types of e-collars used now and the way that they're designed to function, they're not designed to create any lasting implications from it,
Yep.
right? They're much safer to use. They don't carry the same risks as a lot of the old school ones do.